This this is something that we're probably gonna get sick of. In Detroit is the Lions giving us another heartbreaking loss. And this one is more deflating because it feels really like it ended the season with how just kind of with everything that was at stake, with how they played and with how the remaining schedule opens up. The schedule's been pretty easy, but you're hoping they can get this win to get back above 500. And obviously it wasn't. It wasn't able to happen. Literally coming up just 1 yard short of at least sending the game into overtime. And then we kind of seeing what happens there. Cody said, "Run, third and long is the death of the Lions." Yeah, they're not a good running team, and they kept trying to run it when they had the passing game going. The passing game going, excuse me, really all day. I know Stafford have 406 yards today through the air, 3 touchdowns, so really another good game from him. One of the things that's kind of been frustrating, though, with some of his play, and it's probably more so just like the play calling in general, is in the second half, the Lions, their passing game doesn't ever seem to be nearly as effective as it was in the first. And I don't know if that's just the other team making adjustments, if that's Stafford being off the mark, or if that's Darrell Bevel not calling as many passing plays as he should, or at least just not putting the team in the right position. So if you look at the rushing numbers, so it's strange because watching the game, it didn't seem like they had the running game going at all. And then if you check the numbers afterwards, they did average 4.5 yards a carry. But where a lot of the frustration came with the running game was Ty Johnson led the team in carries, and he had kind of the least effective day on the ground in terms of just yard per carry average. He had nine carries for just about a little bit less than 30 yards. He had 29, so a little bit over 3 yards a carry there. But everybody else on the Lions was, and they had limited opportunities, of course. But Marvin Hall had the one run for 7 yards. Paul Perkins got three carries for 16 yards, but he had a 13-yard carry in there. And then J.D. McKissick, 4 carries for 32 yards. So overall, as a team, if you were just to look at the numbers, they had a better running game today than they had before. But obviously, watching the game is a completely different story. My man Evan Sharon, painful to watch, absolutely horrible play calling. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the fourth down call at the very end there to bootleg it out, and it looked like they had I don't know, Bawden's still the fullback, but it looked like that they had the fullback there as maybe one of the other options, and the Raiders cut that off. But other than that, it didn't seem like you really had anybody else to go to except Logan Thomas at the end, where Stafford had to throw the ball a little bit high, and Logan Thomas, being like 6'6", tried to go up and get it and just couldn't come down with it. Philip North, same old Lions. That's probably something that you're going to be hearing a lot of this week, especially if you listen to like 97.1 or any type of local media. So the team put us out of our misery. That's actually something that we talked about on the Sports Carnage podcast like 2 weeks ago, where if the Lions were to sell, so there's 2 scenarios. If another football team came to Detroit and it was the Detroit Tiger Sharks or something like that, would you switch your allegiance away from the Lions to the new Detroit team? And the Lions were still here, so we would have 2 teams. Would you switch over and jump ship? Or if the Lions were to just pick up and move away and they went to New York or whatever, but the Lions went away and then we got a new team here that essentially just replaced the Lions, would you still follow that? Would you still follow that new Detroit team, or would you be too invested into the Lions? We had some pretty interesting answers. I think that there's a clear right answer, but if you listen to the podcast, you can hear that. But I'd be happy to get your thoughts on that. We are having a fire sale now. Well, we can't have a fire sale because we didn't do anything at the trade deadline and everything's passed. The most we could do now is just cut everybody, but that doesn't help us at all. Martha needs to sell the Lions. Say good luck on that one. It seems they let Stafford be a gunslinger, then dial it back with conservative play calls. Yeah, and it's especially seems like that in spots where it doesn't make sense. I can even understand some weeks, because this isn't the first week that we've seen the conservative play calling. I don't agree with the philosophy, but I can understand in some weeks how if you have a lead in the second half and it's like a 2-score lead, you might be more you might be more willing to try and bleed the clock out a little bit, and then just to kind of get yourself out of there with the win faster. I don't agree with it, but there's logic behind that. In a game like this, where it's a constant back and forth, and you're not stopping them and they're not stopping you, I don't see why you would go more conservative with the play calling, especially when you do have the better quarterback. I know your defense might be worse than Oakland's, but you do have the better quarterback, so putting the ball in his hands less. And I mean, we saw some of our even skill positions have really big games today. Kenny Golladay had a huge game, 132 yards, a touchdown. Marvin Jones, 126 yards and a touchdown. T.J. Hawkinson, had 56 yards, 3 catches. J.D. McKissick, again, 40 yards. Danny Amendola, 30 yards. And it looked like, I don't know if he came back into the game, but when he went, it looked like he dove. Or no, he caught the ball, he got hit. And then it looked like he broke his hand or something, because he came up and he was grabbing it. And I don't know that I saw him for the rest of the game. So if that's the case, I'm sure we'll see it on an injury report. But as soon as that happened, I said, oh, it looked like he broke his hand, because he's holding it and he's paying a whole lot of attention to it. Running team, they're not a good team in general. No, they're not. They're not a good team. Neither is Oakland. So you thought, with part of the way that the schedule has kind of opened up for them, and they have an easier back half of the schedule than they did to begin the year. Granted, to begin the year, they got to play. They're pretty fortunate in having the Eagles, who were hit with a lot of injuries, and then the Chargers, who were hit with a lot of injuries at the time that the Lions played them. And I don't know what's going on with the Chargers and Green Bay game now, but for a while, the Chargers were smacking them, and then they ended up winning 26-11. So today would have been a really huge opportunity for the Lions to pick up a game on everyone else in the division, because literally every other team lost. The Vikings lost. The Bears lost to the Eagles. Who the Vikings lose to? The Vikings lost to the Chiefs, and then the Packers lost to the Chargers. So if you wanted those playoff hopes, it was kind of the dream scenario going into 4 o'clock whenever the Lions kicked off, because you knew at least already that the Vikings and the Bears had lost. And then, you're just kind of hoping that Green Bay would drop the game, and and obviously they did. So you were really hoping as a fan that this could put the Lions in a better position than, in a normal circumstance if they would have won. Why don't you go to your stud receivers on that last play? Like I said, I think it was more so the design, and I don't know if it was just Oakland did a really good job of covering everyone, but Stafford, obviously, they did the play action, and then he rolled to one side of the field. So automatically, you're pretty much cutting off the entire other half of the field. You only have one side to work with, unless you want to throw all the way across your body, which is obviously never recommended and really never a good idea. So automatically, you're eliminating 50% of the field, and then you had your fullback running kind of right in front of Stafford. I think the Lions were obviously hoping that the Raiders would bite on the play action a little bit harder, and Stafford would either, be able to easily just kind of roll in for the touchdown by himself, or be able to dump it off to a fullback or one of the tight ends that obviously they had planned to get loose in the back of the end zone. That didn't happen. The pressure was coming on Stafford, so he just kind of had to fling it up to Logan Thomas, and hopefully that his biggest body down there would be able to come away with it. And of course, that didn't happen. Nothing heartbreaking. They tore my heart long ago. It's sad that I've become numb to a different season, different faces, same Lions. Yeah, you hear a lot of that too, especially from Matt, who does the Sports Carnage podcast with us. He's the oldest member of our group, and that's something that he echoes a lot. Is he really believes in that same old Lion sentiment, where it's just the team in general. It doesn't matter if it's a different team from 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's still the Lions. It's still the same name on the front of the jerseys. It doesn't matter, kind of what names are on the back, and because you guys have been, or I'm assuming most of you have probably been alive longer than me. You've been watching the Lions longer, and we've kind of seen the same amount of success. So I see why older fans, and it's something I hear from older fans in my family too. Like, there's a reason that they've just kind of obviously they can't trust the Lions, and it's something that some of them have even sworn off. The slackers list, beautiful. I don't know what that means. So sick of losing 80% one-score games. I don't know if that number is true, but it certainly seems like it. But yeah, we don't. It's not like we win a lot of blowouts either. I'm just sick of having I'm just sick of having close games. I want to win by 20 points, with a 17-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and then you feel like, okay, this might be fine. But I mean, we saw that in the Arizona game where it didn't really work out for us. Can I ask the play calling on that last play? Yeah, it's something that we kind of been over already. They play actioned. It looked like Oakland obviously didn't bite on it, and they covered that fullback that was right there. The Lions eliminated half the field by having Stafford roll out to one, and then he was getting pressure in his face, so he had to throw it away. Well, not throw it away, but throw it up and just kind of pray, as opposed to being able to make a better throw to an open receiver. At some point, you have to have playmakers. I think the Lions do have playmakers. I think Stafford's a playmaker. I don't know if you're only talking about skill positions, but Stafford's played great this year. I'd certainly say he's a playmaker at the quarterback position. And then, Galladay and Marvin Jones, definitely guys you like having on the outside, and guys that every team would be happy to just be happy to have in their receiving corps, where we're have a distinct lack of playmaking is in our backfield. And obviously that's kind of what people thought the Lions were going to address at the trade deadline, and then they didn't. So we're stuck with Ty Johnson before the game, before the game, but not like right before the game. Who else did they have that they were kind of counting on? It's Ty Johnson, J.D. McKissick, and then it was like right after the trade deadline. Somebody, I think they put somebody on injured reserve or something. But it's why they ended up picking up Paul Perkins. Trey Carson, that's who it was. But yeah, Trey Carson obviously didn't play. What's this? Everyone considered the timeout a gift, but I actually think it affected the play call. Could have been close to that Dallas game. Yeah, that's something that we were talking in our like Sports Carnage group chat, and I was happy that the Raiders called the timeout, just because I like the idea of the Lions getting a little bit more time. But Paul, who's obviously on the podcast, said the timeout said if they didn't call the timeout, the Lions would have gotten a free touchdown. So I think there's certainly something to that. If the Lions obviously kind of knew what they wanted to, if the Lions knew what they wanted to run, and the Raiders were kind of scrambling, the Lions were only a yard away. So I can see why Gruden called the timeout. But at the time, like I said, I liked him calling the timeout because I wanted us to be able to have at least what we felt would be the perfect play call. But it wasn't the perfect play call, obviously. Somebody missed a block. I'm sure that happened because our offensive line is terrible. Christopher Waddell, we drown. Don't understand why we didn't sign Ajayi. Well, Ajayi hasn't been I don't think anybody signed him at this point, have they? Let me check real quick. But Ajayi, Lions worked him out 2 days ago. Drafted by the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, I don't see anybody signing Ajayi. So I don't know if he would have helped today, but I think that kind of gives you an idea, especially he's worked out for not just us, but he's worked out for other teams too. And obviously they didn't like what they've seen in the workouts. So I think he'd be pretty much a non-factor, but we can use all the running back help that we can get. I'm glad I don't let it get to me anymore. Well, Sammy, I hope to get there one day, but right now it still hurts. Gerald says we need a new quarterback. That I don't agree with. Stafford's been terrific this year. To Jeffrey, Vikings, Bears, Packers lose, and we give one away. My Sunday calendar just opened up. Yeah, like I said at the beginning of our discussion, it really seemed like the Lions needed this victory to have really any hopes of the playoffs. And of course, mathematically, this game didn't kill those chances, but you just kind of get the feeling from around. You just kind of get the feeling, especially from fans, of course. And I know we're typically more reactionary than obviously like coaches and players and things like that. But if any path to the playoffs started with the Lions winning this game, after they had the win last week against the Giants, before that when they got kind of blasted by Minnesota, the thought was, well, your next two games are New York and Oakland. Those are definitely two winnable games. You can go there, get to 4-3-1, and then you kind of don't know how else the rest of just the playoff picture is shaking out. And obviously, fortunately for the Lions today, all three teams in their division lost. So would have given you a chance to pick up a game on both Minnesota and Green Bay if we were able to get the win. And of course, that didn't happen. But that was kind of the path, is we needed to get to 4-3-1. We needed to beat Oakland, and then next week play against Chicago, who looks terrible right now. But obviously their defense is still scary going up against our offensive line. But if you could have got the 2 wins and then the one toss up where you might even feel like the Lions had a good chance to win that game, and now you're 5-3-1. The playoffs are certainly something that you could have seen in the future. Jason says ownership is key. They are garbage. Yeah, the owner or owners are doing a very bad job, and they have for quite a few years. Zachary Spank, is Patricia's job safe? I think Patricia's job is safe, only because with the moves they made, kind of specifically like the Quandre Diggs one, and then the moves that they didn't make to either sell or buy a bunch of players. At least what that signaled to me was that the Lions, the Lions kind of front office knows that they at least have another year to try and figure things out. They have another draft class to bring in. They have another offseason to spend on free agency and kind of make any coaching adjustments they want to make. Now, those coaching adjustments, I don't think would come at the would come for Matt Patricia. But, it's things like the scouting department, training, maybe some assistant coaches or things like that, I think are changes that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are still going to be able to make. So I do think that they're back next year. Beyond that, obviously your guess is as good as mine. Of course not if this continues. Say they need to fire Patricia. He takes out his 2 best receivers. And Matt, the biggest thing with me about Matt Patricia is I don't know how much of the final play call was on him, but the Lions just don't really ever look prepared, and they play like stupid. They play stupid football. Of not all of that you can attribute to coaching, but when it happens consistently, that's something that really frustrates you, especially with the special teams. So today they had the punt where it looked like they could have downed it, and then our guy just let the ball roll into the end zone where it could have been down at the 1 yard line, the 2 yard line, and really flipped field position. And then it gave the Raiders the ball at like the 20 because he just stared at it and let it roll in. And then they had the I think it was Jared Davis, who was a 3rd and like 14. They checked it down, and he commits pass interference for absolutely no reason, giving the Raiders the chance to extend the drive. The owners let the GM do whatever they want. So I will say that is that's what good owners should do. So they have that part right, where you don't want an owner like Jerry Jones kind of breathing down the neck or making personnel decisions. You want your owners to trust the general manager enough to put faith in him to build a team. It's just obviously it doesn't look like that they picked the right general manager. Or if you do think that they picked the right general manager, you don't want Martha Ford making those football decisions. You want who's the president, Rod Wood. So the people that she's kind of put in place to find the right football people, you want her to still trust that decision making, as opposed to saying, hey, we have to sign X, Y, and Z, or we can't sign X, Y, and Z. Say, why use so many running backs? They made no trades for a running back at the trade deadline, which means they gave up another season. I feel sorry for whatever city would take them. They used so many running backs because they don't have a workhorse in their backfield. Obviously, Kerryon went down, Trey Carson went down, so they were stuck with McKissick, Ty Johnson, and Paul Perkins. I don't mind them not like hammering Ty Johnson or something like that, but you feel like they obviously could have got a guy like Kenyon Drake at the trade deadline, who just had a tremendous game for the Cardinals, who did end up getting him. And then there was a report that came out, I think it came out today, where the Lions were willing to give up a third-round pick for Rashad Penny, but that's more than what the Cardinals got for Kenyon Drake, and I think Kenyon Drake's a better player than Rashad Penny is. So why would you give that up for, in my opinion, a worse player and a worse running back, but not pay the 4th or 5th round price for Kenyon Drake? So that's what bothered me kind of more about them not making a move. Lions had a chance and they went to bed. Time to accept that another disappointing season. It certainly looks like it's going to be another disappointing season, and I think today was the game where a lot of the fans were going to kind of place their final stake in the team. If they won, I think there would have been a lot of people back on the playoffs bandwagon, especially with the way the NFC North shaked out today, where, hey, we can do this. And now that they lost, all the comments here, me, you, and you're just going to hear it on the radio tomorrow, is there's going to be a lot of people jumping up, a lot of people talking about, hey, Quinn needs to go, Patricia needs to go. We're going to have another season of 6-7 wins, things like that. People are really going to start jumping off the boat. So 32 is an ability to pick up the goal line before the Raiders. No problem scoring. We have no problem scoring. Our D is full of holes. Yeah, our defense is still bad, which is one of the other main concerns about Matt Patricia. Is we brought him in obviously to be a defensive coach, and our defense has looked horrible this year. And last year they only looked good for like the last 8 games or so. They could care less about winning. All smiles afterwards. I think the Lions are a team that wants to win. So that that sentiment I would disagree with. They seem like they play with heart, but they're obviously not the best players in the world, and I don't think they're super well coached either. So the team Martha, season's over. Defense is horrible in the fourth quarter. And they were pretty bad all game, but in the fourth quarter, when you need more stops, they weren't able to get it. I know they had the play near when Oakland was on the goal line and Carr threw it. Josh Jacobs ended up bobbling it, and then I think it was Tracy Walker, or no, Tavon Wilson, who like kind of had the pick in his hands and then dropped it. But if they make that play, it's probably a totally different ball game. My guess would be that Tavon ended up taking it to the house and got into the end zone. But even if not, of course, the Raiders don't score that touchdown, and he at least gets to like midfield. So now you're getting the ball back with 2 minutes to go, and you're at midfield, and the game is tied. So you're really able to dictate, or you would have been able to dictate the game had just kind of had that one play been made, and then even on that second and goal where Stafford got sacked, and it looked like he got sacked twice. I don't know if he was touched the first time, but he got back up and then got tackled again. The third down, they get there. They get right to the goal line, and they're like a yard short. So football really is a game of inches in that aspect of it, where if they make the interception, probably a different outcome. Even if Stafford doesn't take the sack, it certainly would have changed the play calling from, their second and goal at like the 15 or whatever it was, as opposed to being the second and goal at like the 8. The trade deadline was insulting. No moves made. Yeah, I understand why. I understand why a lot of people have said that. So for me personally, with the thing with the trade deadline is we don't know what moves they could have made, or really what moves that they tried to make, and I don't want them to make a move just for the sake to make one. Like some people wanted Darius Slay either moved, or they wanted the Lions to pick up any of the names that were floating out there. I know Jamal Adams was floating out there, and they said that the Lions called about him. But if a price is either too high for a guy that you want to get, or you don't feel like you're getting the value on a guy like Darius Slay, then in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to trade that person just to kind of appease the fan base. Would I have liked them to do something? Obviously, but I wouldn't want them to do something just for the sake of, well, we have to make a move one way or another. Do lower your expectations. We are ordinary even on a good day. I'm trying, but we should have been better than the Raiders. I thought Patricia was a defensive guru. The Lions are the Lions. SOL. We are cursed. I hope to God that we're not cursed, but it certainly seems that way. Miami chant, we want Detroit. I was happy for the Dolphins today, who ended up picking up their first win. Bo says, I watched this game completely sober and still wanted to have a drunken fit after the game. That's actually really funny. Good on you, Bo. Pat Fogarty, no Jones or Galladay. What a joke. I assume you're talking about on the last play, where it looked like they came out in their goal line personnel and ran the play action pass that didn't work. Cody says, we are getting destroyed by the pass when we blitz. I know he's a 3-4 guy, but it's clearly not working. I mean, we're getting destroyed by the pass all the time. I think the Lions only ended up with the one sack on Derek Carr today. No words, bro. You're just at a loss for words. Yes, it's how we all feel when our jaw drops at the end of game every Sunday. Yeah, certainly. You hope that you don't see more of that. But last play, pass interference, it was not called. No, I'll put it like this, Bob. If the situation was reversed and the Lions had gotten pass interference called on them on the last play when an Oakland tight end went up and came down, I'd be furious that the call was made. So I don't think it was pass interference. I think obviously there was contact because it was the last play of the game, but it's certainly still a play that could have been made. I think you have a way bigger issue with what the play call was and what the design of the play was than anything that the refs did, because I felt like, even if there was contact, it certainly wasn't egregious. Dennis Hollywood, excellent name. Thing about is we will not make any adjustments off season. Depends on your definition. Obviously, there will be some players that we bring in, but you of course don't know if they're going to make another big splash like they made when they signed Trey Flowers, or even a guy like Justin Coleman. Players will come and go, and there will be signings that were like, oh yeah, it was a good signing, just because it happens every offseason. Or, oh hey, I really like that guy, it was a nice contract. And then there will be guys where you feel like you overpaid for him, or guys that you feel like just suck. Like Christian Jones, he just got a 2-year extension. Why? He's been our linebackers are terrible, and he's been one of the worst ones. So I don't understand keeping him around for longer than you need to. Perkins, who's basketball? I'm about to just got done eating. Oh. Michael says, this is what the Lions are. We know they're an average team at best, undisciplined Lions. We've seen this game hundreds of times. The game was there for them all day. The game was certainly there for the taking, and the second half play calling, it seemed like almost took it away from them, just because they weren't able to obviously execute the game plan as well as they were able to in the first half, and they went away from some of the things that worked. And then the defense again. I mean, you're giving up 30 points to a team like Oakland, who does have some weapons, but they're really without a number one receiver. You let their backup running back and a receiver who's just frankly not that good in Hunter Renfrow. Kind of run all over you. In a sense, they ran all over you in the passing game, and then their running back Josh Jacobs ran all over you in the running game. So he had 120 yards. The Lions again gave up basically 5 yards a carry. Oakland 170 rushing yards. We had Derek Carr here have about 290 passing yards. So it was a really nice balance for them, especially because they didn't take a lot of negative plays. Derek Carr was only sacked the one time, and let me see if they have penalties here. All right, there are team stats. There we go. Because it didn't seem. Yep, Lions 2 penalties and Oakland. Oh no, I was looking at turnovers. I'm sorry. Oakland 10 penalties and the Lions 5. So in that aspect, the Lions were more disciplined than Oakland was today. But that's not saying a lot when the other team had 10 penalties, and it's kind of more of it's more of kind of like a biting shot at yourself if the other team has 10 penalties for basically 100 yards, right? They had a whole football field worth of yardage that they had taken away from them, and you still weren't able to come away with the victory. I'm never watching this team again. See you guys next week. That's funny. I feel like that's probably been said trillions of times throughout, even just the last 10 years. Get what feeling that the Lions are the butthole of the NFC, and you feel it knocking at your back foot. They're technically not, as the Bears are still in last place, but the Lions are right above them. But next week that could change, as obviously the Lions play the Bears, so it'll be a battle of the stellar NFC North teams. Lions are the Lions. Nothing changes with the date. So it counts. So we need to win outright and hope we sneak in with the wild card. If the Lions just need to win the rest of their games and then get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously the Lions win their next, or they have 8 more games, so they'll be 11-4-1 if they end up winning every single game. But you could bet dollars to donuts that won't happen. Evan Sharon, I can't say it enough. Play calling kills this team. Yeah, every time that the Lions, I understand wanting to set up the run to set up the pass and not make your team one-dimensional, but the only good thing that the Lions do is pass the ball, and it seems like every time that they run, they're just wasting a play. And you obviously can't throw the ball 70 times a game, but it's just in some of the situations that they end up running, or in some of the spots where they hand the ball off, and as soon as Stafford goes to turn it around and hand the ball to Ty Johnson or hand the ball to Paul Perkins, that the play is just not going to work. And instead of maybe even 2nd and 5, they with a short completion, they put themselves in a hole because now they're 2nd and 9. You're overthinking and overanalyzing. I don't think I'm overanalyzing, but I could. The Lions are just bad, and there's a lot to analyze, and none of it's good, which is a shame. Thought Patricia was a defensive guru. Yeah, we hear that a lot too over the last, but even throughout the season, is everybody kind of turning on Matt Patricia. They're in a soul that can manage Detroit, get out of the flaming dumpster. Martha needs to sell it all off, just like all over the price and shoddy built vehicles. Millions invested. Oh, well, I don't know that there's a correlation between how bad the Lions are and Ford vehicles, but Martha is the head of both snakes. J.J. was available and never signed him. Yeah, again, no team has signed J.J. yet, so I don't know that he would have made a whole lot of difference, but he certainly couldn't. It certainly wouldn't hurt our backfield. But he's not it's not like you're going to get him and then get what Adrian Peterson was able to do. I think the first year he was with the Redskins. I'm too dignified. I hope not. Bad is an understatement. That's being nice. Our defense couldn't stop a fly with a 50-foot net. That's funny. Why take out your two best offensive weapons when the game is on the line? Like I said, I think they tried to get a little bit too cute at the end there. And they wanted to sell the run and walk in for like an easy touchdown, and it of course didn't work. Why the pass at 4th and 2 to tie the game? I don't mind the decision to throw the ball because you get more options with just being able to run it with Stafford if necessary, and you have more areas to go than if you just run the ball. I don't like the rollout though. The rollout doesn't make sense to me because you take away half the field. Look, Green Bay lost today. That's a surprise. Lions lost. It's a given. Yeah, they certainly don't have the expectations that the Packers do. At least Ford Field tickets will be easier to get. Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking to go to the Thanksgiving Day game, now is probably a really good time to get your tickets because everyone's really mad. So maybe you can get some off Craigslist or StubHub for real cheap. Take the family out. Upcoming off-season moves: find any former Patriots player and pay them a butt ton of money and do nothing, then claim you're still working on changing the culture. That's I think you just hit the Matt Patricia bingo there. Your viewers are dropping. Yeah, the viewers are dropping, but we've been talking for about 40 minutes, so I don't expect everybody to stay around with me. I do appreciate the ones that do though. Honestly, I believe it's time to move from Stafford and Slay for draft picks. Well, if they're going to do that, they have to do it in the offseason because, again, they didn't do that at the trade deadline. But I do think at some point if they don't sign Darius Slay, they'll end up trading him, whether it's in the offseason or sometime around the draft where you see other trades start to happen, or even obviously next year before the trade deadline. And talk about analyzing this. That's 3 times right there. But I think Slay ends up getting moved, definitely more so than Stafford. I drank Jack Daniels. Thank you very much. Excellent choice. Don't matter who's on the team afterwards. After the words of Al Davis, just win, baby. Well, that'd be certainly nice for the Lions to win, but the Raiders haven't done much winning themselves. But I mean, obviously they beat us today, so shout out to Al Davis in that regard. But if you're just a football fan, then maybe this game could at least be like an appetizer for the Patriots and the Ravens game that's coming up. I think it's going to be an excellent game. So if you're a football fan and you're sticking around to watch that, I'm sure you're in for a treat there and maybe get some of the sour taste out of your mouth here. AJ says Stafford will stay. He's making all he needs for money. He's actually playing football to play football. Yeah, I mean, Stafford, you never really question Stafford's love of the game, and I think he probably will retire a Lion at this point in his career. And I think we talked about it last week after the Lions game against the Giants is, Stafford's really on pace to be top 5 in pretty much any passing record that he wants. Touchdowns, probably completions, certainly yardage. So by the time he retires, he'll be really high up there on all the all-time list. And him and his family, of course, have just made their life in Detroit. So I don't expect Stafford to go anywhere. The only place you could ever see him going, at least for me, was Dallas a couple years ago, right as Romo was about to retire, and right before they kind of knew or kind of thought that they had their next quarterback in the future in Dak Prescott. That would have been the time to move Stafford, and it's not obviously what the Lions did, but I wouldn't expect Dallas to take on Stafford now. Of course not if they end up paying Dak, which I think they will. Stafford is the next Dan Marino. All stats, no rings. I mean, Dan Marino's not a bad guy to be. I can see why you'd say that in a negative context where, hey, he's never going to get a Super Bowl ring. But, I mean, Stafford's had an amazing career here, and he'll end his career with, at least Hall of Fame numbers. And, Dan Marino is a Hall of Famer, and I expect Stafford to get the same kind of treatment. I was in Georgia recently, and everywhere I went, people know him and remember his gameplay at GS. Not a bad word about him. Yeah, I mean, Stafford's been, since his first 2 years where he got hurt, he's been, an Iron Man for the Lions, and he's been somebody who He's people here have bad words to say about him, but it's not him as like a person. The worst thing that anyone's ever really said about him as a person in Detroit is that he doesn't get fired up enough about the games and about the calls and things like that. But nobody ever claims that he's like a jerk or anything. Doesn't matter who comes to the Lions. Draft picks are free agents. We don't fill holes we need to fill year after year. Yeah, that's certainly not and that's a really good point by you, William, especially with like the offensive line. It seems like, even running back in the draft this year, it doesn't ever seem like Bob Quinn is going for that type of like need or fit. So that I agree with. They're kind of picking on things that. Now let me rephrase that, because they went after needs, but at least in my opinion, it wasn't the biggest needs that they needed. To draft a QB and learn from Stafford what not to do and get better. Georgia State do this game played. Oh, the game he played at Georgia State, because obviously he went to Georgia. Austin says draft a QB and learn from Stafford what not to do and get a better offensive line. I mean, if the Lions did draft a quarterback, I think Stafford would be open to teaching him, but I don't know how. I also don't think it's something that he'd like, because Stafford has a lot of football left in him. And if you're going to draft a quarterback, in the first couple rounds, that's obviously a signal to the guy, like, hey, or the current guy, hey, we're kind of moving on from you. You just saw the Bengals do that with Andy Dalton and starting Ryan Finley. And then Dalton came out after the trade deadline because he didn't end up getting traded, of course, and said, I wish they would have told me that they were moving on, so that way me and my agent could have tried and see if there was a team that we could go to, and if there was a trade that could be worked out. But I think Stafford would be open to mentoring someone else, although I don't know that he would necessarily like it. But he seems like the type of leader to say, hey, I want to do that. Then again, like at Rodgers, he keeps his cool always. Well, I mean, not if you ask Mike McCarthy, but they seem. And I didn't see any of the tape today. I'd expect Rodgers was pretty mad about the game today. Eli Manning. Yeah, Eli Manning's a quarterback that he always had that kind of stupid look on his face. Him and guys like Jay Cutler. Rodgers is a quiet leader. He commands his team with integrity, like Stafford. I don't know how quiet Rodgers is. And Rodgers is a player I hate because he plays for the Packers, but he's obviously a great quarterback. But I mean, he's had issues before this year, not necessarily issues, but there were kind of signs about even former teammates really not liking to play with him, and you could see he'd obviously like call out his receivers publicly, which is not the signs of the best leader. As a joke, I hate how they're killing Stafford's career. Yeah, I mean, imagine it was I think it was Golden Tate, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, who said something like, Stafford was on another team, he could have a couple rings by now, as opposed to the Lions. It was at least a former Lions player. I want to say it was Golden Tate, but Golden Tate talks a lot about Stafford and about the Lions in general. Lions never win on the West Coast, betting on it, easy money. They won. I mean, they beat LA this year. Wasn't that in LA? Lions, Chargers. Nope, that was in Detroit. Haha. So looks like you're still right on that one. But we're at about 45 minutes now, so we are going to let you guys go ahead and get on with your Sunday night. I'm sure you got work tomorrow, and then you got another fun football game to watch. But if you guys like what you heard here, thank you so much for listening for however long you did. And you can hear more on the Sports Carnage podcast. We just dropped one on Thursday. We're recording Tuesday, and they come out every Thursday. So you can follow the link here in the description. The Sports Carnage podcast is highlighted in blue, or you can find us on iTunes, Podbean. Just Google us. We have YouTube, which this reaction will be on in probably like 20 minutes, because this video is a little bit longer. But that's what we have for you guys tonight, and thank you for listening.